Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Oops. Okay. So, Veronica from the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore here. Today, to kick off the resilience and the adaptability track, I'm obviously here to talk about cybersecurity. But I wanted to start today's presentation with this running joke that has been making its rounds since the start of the global pandemic. And the question is, who led the digital transformation of your company? Is it your CEO? Is it CIO? And I think we all know it was the COVID-19 virus. So I think the COVID-19 virus was actually a big test of organizations' resilience and adaptability. But I think we have all survived and we have come out of it relatively well, simply because I think when driven by the need to do so, we have all taken on the task of digital transformation very seriously. And this is actually taken off the World Economic Forum, where they talked about digital transformation, not just a way for us to deal with and manage the global pandemic, but really beyond that, a sustainable growth engine. And they talked about how COVID-19 has pushed companies to scale remote work, accelerate digitalization, and accelerate automation. And this does not stop because whatever that we have picked up as a result of the habits during the global pandemic, I think we are likely to continue on now that we have learned some of the benefits of digital transformation. Now, what does this mean in the context of cybersecurity? So I think when we become more digital and as businesses and systems become more interconnected with each other, it also puts organizations into a new trajectory of cyber threats. Ransomware is not new, but you can look at the curve. It has grown steadily, and you would see that in the recent few years, it has increased and accelerated the pace. What is the reason behind it? So there are business models such as ransomware as a service that has made ransomware a much more easier attack to be able to launch. So with ransomware as a service, even an adversary who wants to launch an attack but doesn't have the technical skills is able to do so by engaging this as a service. There's also cybersecurity supply chain issues, which has also taken a certain prominence in the past 2 years. And then finally, all of us as humans, we are always usually part of the reason why organizations may actually suffer a breach. So I think recognizing that cybersecurity is actually increasingly important in the digital world, this is also the reason why businesses are all paying great attention to cybersecurity risk among all the risks that they have to pay attention to. So this is taken off the World Economic Forum's risk report. Business leaders have a lot to think about and worry about, from things like inflationary costs to geopolitical issues. But among the technological issues, cybersecurity is definitely at the top of mind for business leaders. So in CSA, what we advocate is basically a risk-based approach to cybersecurity. What does a risk-based approach mean? So if you look at the triangle on the left-hand side, this would generally describe organizations that form Singapore's economy, large and small. For a large organization, you're typically an attractive target simply because the impact of an attack on a large organization is usually huge. And that means that you'll be susceptible to a range of attacks, both the less sophisticated as well as more sophisticated attacks. But the good news is a large organization would usually have more resources for cybersecurity, which means that you can actually put in more protective measures to protect yourself. At the other end of the spectrum, a smaller organization doesn't mean that you are going to be not attractive to an attacker and therefore be so-called free of attacks. I think the answer is unfortunately no. Even small organizations, also because they are generally not well known about their cybersecurity posture, can be seen as a simple and easy target. And if you are a simple and easy target, attackers will always find a way to get to you as well. So I think that's why we say it's practical to take on a risk-based approach to cybersecurity, and I'll cover this a little bit more in my subsequent slides. So I think coming from the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore, we have various initiatives to help organizations who are at different stages of their cybersecurity journey. Let me start with awareness. I think awareness is the most important because we all need to know why we need to give and care about cybersecurity as part of our business. Now that we have been aware, the next part is then moving into adoption, or rather action, where we take concrete action to actually protect ourselves. And finally, on the right-hand side, You think you probably have reached a certain status when you're able to translate your investment in cybersecurity into a business competitive advantage for your organization. So let's start with awareness first. And usually we like to say that awareness starts from the top. So regardless of whether you're a large organization with a board, or whether you're a small organization, SME owner where it's just yourself, there's usually two aspects to it. The business aspect, where you may worry about your day-to-day business issues, and the other issue is cybersecurity. So many business leaders tend to think of cybersecurity as something that's a technical issue. I can outsource it to somebody and I don't have to think about it. But actually, what I said earlier about digital transformation is that it's increasingly part of your business. And once you're digital, chances are you're also vulnerable to cybersecurity risk. So from that perspective, cybersecurity is very much part of the business risk management process, and even business leaders who may think of cybersecurity as just a technical issue should actually start thinking about it from a risk management issue and really be part of their business management. So I think CSA has toolkits that can help business leaders think about this perspective and how cybersecurity is not just a technical issue. Now that we are aware, let's move into taking action. One of the statistics I showed earlier in my slides mentioned how us as humans, we tend to be sometimes the weakest link because we are very busy in our day-to-day work, and some actions that we take may inadvertently result in a breach in the organization. So I think many of us in organizations would basically can subscribe to a feeling like this. Many organizations may not necessarily think too hard about cybersecurity awareness training or building a cybersecurity culture, and a lot of the focus may be on buying hardware or buying solutions to help the company. That is definitely useful, but let us not forget about the human factor, and this is where it's important for large organizations to think about building a cyber awareness culture in your organization. Even for smaller organizations, don't think that a cyber-aware culture is too big for you. We can start with basic cyber awareness of our employees to make sure that they are aware of the basic things that they should do or should not do in order to help keep the organization safe. And again, CSA has published toolkits for organizations to help with that. Earlier on, I talked about the supply chain. So I think, what is a supply chain attack? A supply chain attack happens when you get attacked not directly, but indirectly because of a vulnerability or exploit in your supplier. So a diagram like this would probably apply to most organizations. You may have hardware, you may have software, and you may have providers providing you with services. So I think increasingly in the industry, we're starting to see quite a few prominent software supply chain attacks happening, where there can be a vulnerability in the software. And because this software is used to serve many customers, so when exploited, indirectly, the many customers get exploited as well. And if you think about it, this is actually a very scalable attack for an attacker. If you're an attacker and you go through the effort of finding an exploit, in this case, you're not just able to exploit one specific company, but an entire ecosystem simply because of the number of customers that the suppliers serve. So if you think about this perspective, I think we would see how scalable a software supply chain attack can be. And this is also why, whether we're buyers or we're customers, we should be increasingly more concerned about the cybersecurity posture of our partners. Which then brings me to the point of how cybersecurity becomes a competitive advantage. So bearing in mind what I said earlier about supply chain attacks, if you are a buyer, and if you know that this is actually a very scalable attack for attackers, would you not want to ask all your suppliers who are supplying you hardware, software, or services and ask them, how cyber safe are you? Now, put yourself on the other hand, on the other picture. If you are a supplier to many of these customers, and you find that many of your customers are starting to be aware about this, they will start asking you, how cyber safe are you? So how do you demonstrate that you're cyber safe? There are many ways to do so, but one way that CSA can help you is through a cybersecurity certification program that we have launched last year. So when you think about your investment in cybersecurity, usually all this happens in the back end. It's not something that you can see, but through a certification program, it becomes a visible indicator of your investment in cybersecurity, which then becomes a way for you to build trust with your customers to say that I have a certain commitment to cybersecurity in my organization. And this, in terms, becomes your competitive advantage. For some of you who may be thinking, wow, certification, this is actually too difficult, too high barrier for me. fear not, we have 2 certification programs. Cyber Essentials, which is the one on the slide, is actually intended and designed for the small organization. So it's not meant to be 100% security, because 100% security honestly can be very expensive and difficult to achieve. But what we have done is to identify the key cyber hygiene measures that can help organizations stay protected against the common cyber attacks. So with that, this is a good way for you to get started in your cybersecurity journey. As a certification program, CSA has appointed certification bodies that will be the independent assessors, and they will help to assess your cybersecurity posture before issuing the certificate to you, and it is valid for 2 years. These are some of the measures that we have in Cyber Essentials, so it's very direct, and there are 5 major categories ranging from your assets. Now, assets would include the people, because of what I covered earlier about people being the weakest link, your hardware and software, as well as your data. Then there'll be areas such as secure and protection, software update, backing up your data and storing them offline, and finally, incident response. Now, in this day and light where the threat landscape is increasingly complex and sophisticated, we should not think that being attacked is not going to happen to us. It's just a matter of time. And if this is a matter of not if but when, then I think incident response becomes important for you to actually plan out the scenarios, practice the scenarios just like a fire drill. Eventually, should a fire happen, we will not panic because you would know what to do. So for those of you who have gone beyond cyber hygiene, you may want to take a look at the cyber trust, which is basically taking out a risk-based approach. So earlier on, I mentioned how we advocated a risk-based approach for organizations. What it means is understand your own risk profile based on your business, the industry you operate in. How high risk are you from a cybersecurity perspective? What is your risk appetite? And if you are in a high-risk industry with a reasonably lower risk appetite, you may want to actually implement more cybersecurity measures to protect yourself. And this is where those on the higher tiers of the trust mark may make sense for you. However, if your business is something where you're slightly lower risk, or you may have a more tolerant risk appetite and you are able to accept more risk, then you may not need to implement as much, and maybe the lower tiers of the trust mark would make sense for you. Some of you may be wondering, but how in the world do I know what my own risk appetite is, and how would I know what my risk profile and exposure is? So I think even if you're not interested to go for certification, the Cyber Trust has a tool which helps you to go through a guided risk assessment process. And I think if you work through this risk assessment process, it will help you to also uncover and discover where you should be in terms of your cybersecurity preparedness. So as a certification, there are, again, certification bodies appointed to do the independent assessment, and it's a 2-stage assessment, one on documentation and one on implementation and effectiveness, and this is valid for a period of 3 years. So for those who are looking at Cyber Essentials, we have a tool for you to understand your cyber hygiene posture. If you walk through the spreadsheet, it will basically outline your level of cyber hygiene, and the areas in orange are the ones where you may want to pay attention to it, because these are then the gaps in the cyber hygiene level. Same thing for Cyber Trust, similar spreadsheet, but it's a guided risk assessment process, so it's a little bit longer for you to walk through the various risk scenarios, how exposed you are, think about what your own risk appetite is, and then this will lead you into identifying a suitable cybersecurity preparedness tier for your organization. So where are you in your cybersecurity journey? If you're just starting out all the way on the left, we would want to appeal to business leaders to think about cybersecurity as part of your overall risk management. Understand that it's really something that you need to take care of the moment you do digital transformation. Next step is, if you want to take action but don't know where to start, what we have put in place is a cybersecurity health plan, where we have appointed cybersecurity consultancy providers that can help organizations develop a health plan. So it's just like all of us. In health, we say that prevention is better than cure. So similarly, in cybersecurity, similar principles apply. Go to see your cybersecurity doctor, who will help you outline what your health plan goals are, and basically identify the gaps in your cybersecurity posture and help you to work towards improving it. Over time, you should find that you should be ready for, let's say, Cyber Essentials, or maybe some of you eventually Cyber Trust. So when you have reached this stage, I think this is where you can say that you have implemented good cybersecurity measures, and this can then be your competitive advantage in business. So in closing, I think today is part of the resilience and adaptability track. So I just wanted to iterate the key point, which is as we do digital transformation, cybersecurity is definitely part of organization resilience. And it's not just a single person's responsibility, but collective responsibility. So outside of your organization, if you look at countries, I think countries do come together to have international collaboration and to collaborate simply because in the digital world, it's boundaryless and we don't really look at attacks that just focus on a specific country. It's usually across the board. At organization level, I think we are all part of this ecosystem of supply chain. We should do our parts to be cyber resilient. And if we work with others, then I think it's to our advantage to demonstrate that we are trusted suppliers in the supply chain. And finally, all of us here are individuals and employees in the organization. So if we take off our organization hat, I think all of us also use digital transactions a lot in our life. So whether it's our personal lives or in our corporate lives, we should also then think of cybersecurity as our personal role and our personal responsibility. And with that, I think I've come to the end of my sharing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Veronica. Actually, we have some questions. I'm going to start with a question. So you mentioned the software supply chain, which is very cross-border, actually, because a lot of the software that we use is provided outside Singapore. It's from multiple different countries. Also, there are business processes that may be handled by third parties, by other companies, business processing outsourcing companies, or simply other providers. So I guess my question for you about the Cyber Trust Mark is if your organization wants to go through that, but your supply chain consists of all these other companies and suppliers who are offshore, what do you see as the typical pattern of how long it takes to actually audit your entire supply chain?
So actually there's this slide that looks about a different tier of your supply chain, and it can go actually very deep. So I think as your starting point, as a buyer, you probably have a certain level influence over your direct suppliers, and this would be a good starting point. The good news is you're not alone. I think globally, different jurisdictions are all looking into the supply chain issue, or some are specifically having measures where software is concerned. So I think over time, as different jurisdictions and everybody, due to awareness, actually put this in place, it will slowly ramp up in terms of the cyber hygiene and the cyber resilience level. But we also said that this is an international issue, so definitely it would take time. But I think now is a good time to start, simply because if there is a rising trend of supply chain attacks, and if your supplies are being indirectly the cause of an incident on yourself, you would be impacted. So there's definitely motivations for organizations to take the step.
Okay, thanks. I'm just going to move the microphone to next question.
Hi, my name is Paul. We were just having conversation outside talking about cybersecurity. And Singapore alone, just last year, about 600 million reported scams. So I guess there's a lot of cyber security or poor cyber hygiene at the end consumer or individual level, right, to get scammed. So are there ways to improve that? It's not just by having a cyber safe mark alone at a company, but are there systematic ways that you could easily cut half of the scam, like introducing a compulsory 2FA for every social media platform here in Singapore?
Compulsory?
2FA.
Okay.
Right, because currently it's still optional.
Okay.
But the people that get scammed could be professionals like us, not turning it on, right? So I guess that could really save heartaches of many citizens to make it a standardized process. But that's one of the areas I thought could be a good feedback, right, to improve on one of the checkbox for cyber-safe platforms to use.
So I wish that there was a magic answer where, it would solve 50% of the issues. Unfortunately, I think so far we may not have found the magic answer yet. I think awareness is definitely important, and awareness definitely needs to continue. I think maybe it's also both a mix of awareness as well as somebody knowing somebody who has been personally impacted. I was just joking at the start of this event with somebody to say that there's this running joke around in the industry. 2 money jars. 1 money jar, amount of budget before cybersecurity incident, a few coins inside. Another money jar, amount of budget after a cybersecurity incident, and the jar is full of coins. I think many of you who are cyber professionals may have seen that little infographic or that cartoon lying around. So I think for many people, when you tell them about cybersecurity, usually the typical reaction is, it won't happen to me, because it's a little bit far away from you and a little bit not part of your daily life. But the moment you hear about somebody knowing somebody who knows somebody who got impacted, I think it becomes a bit more real, and I think you start to pay attention. So if we look at some of the, and since you mentioned scam, if you look at some of the recent reports on individuals being scammed that has been making its round in the newspapers, I would say it's definitely a very sad thing that people get scammed, but I think also because of the fact that it is a bit more prominent in the media now, people are actually getting a bit more aware about it and taking real action so that they don't think that is going to happen to them. So I think it's a mixture of a couple of things. One is really, number one, awareness needs to continue. Secondly, I think is bringing that message home to individuals so that's a bit closer to them and a bit more related to them so that they will actually feel compelled to take action.
Okay. Any final question, Veronica?
Hi, thank you very much. I really love that you highlighted the people part, because I think it's kind of ignored in many organizations, and I think there was a famous, I can't remember who said it, but in the business world, the cultures eat strategy for breakfast, right? So I was just wondering, what are the modalities that you would recommend, or as is already in the program, to kind of get people to be aware, and then the steps that they can take at the individual level? Yeah.
Your question is about what we recommend in terms of measures to address the people awareness bit.
Yeah, correct. And also what they can do in terms of individual responsibility and also collective responsibility as a people.
So I think one is things like phishing scams, which is actually gaining quite a lot of prominence. And this is actually part of social engineering. Cyber threat attackers are actually very good readers and, in a way, psychology of the human mind. So they know that humans actually, we're usually very careful most of the time, but we sometimes lose our ability to be rational when we are stressed and kanjiong, or, things like that. Or it's because of somebody we trust. So I think when you do see messages or content coming to you from that's creating a certain level of anxiety in you, sometimes it's really stop, don't do immediate action, and think first to see whether there's anything suspicious that you want to actually ask questions about. It's actually very, very hard to do because all of us, when we get kanjiong, we really forget about being rational. But I think this is actually one of the tactics. It doesn't make things happen. It doesn't make things better that we now have a lot of generative AI tools that has taken the industry by storm. So people have said that with generative AI tools, some of the old cybersecurity guidance we give, like phishing email, look for poor grammar or badly constructed messages. Actually, with generative AI, the messaging is fantastic. They are able to actually come up with messages that are quite to the point as well. So I think, unfortunately for us humans, we have to be even more alert to things like that. So it's really some of these classic advice, but really then packaged into something that takes it to a newer level to take into account new threats like generative AI. That even, okay, I'm rambling on here, but I just wanted to cover this article I read that says that even faces that's generated by generative AI statistically is more well-liked by people and more deemed to be more believable by people. So imagine what the dangers could be. And here we are all struggling to already deal with the bread and butter cybersecurity issues. So I think this is something that we really need to ramp up on as an industry to make sure that as generative AI tools ramp up in their capabilities, we also don't fall prey so much to social engineering and continue to be alert, even though it's very hard for us to do so certain times when we're stressed or when we're busy or in a hurry.
Okay, just time for one more question. Charlie, do you want to come down and get your seat set up?
Hi, I'm Jane. I just have a question. So in the name of promoting more awareness, consumer awareness, do you think there will be a chance that we will have a nationwide kind of drill where we, send fake phishing emails to educate people about it. And then basically, if they click accidentally, they will say, "You've got scammed, please attend a 5-minute training video," or something. Is there something that you see will be on the horizon?
So that is actually some ideas that we've seen floating out in industry. So typically in an organization, large organizations and even government, you have this phishing exercise where your IT department will design this very nice phishing email and see how many people they catch. The question is, are we able to extend this nationwide? I think we have to think a bit more carefully because it depends on how it's done. I think there are ways to do it properly so that people don't get tripped over it. But I think it can be extended to a larger concept. We just have to design it a little bit differently from an intra-organizational effort.